The body floated just beneath the surface, rolling gently with the current like it was trying to breathe one last time. A thin layer of algae clung to her hair. The deputy standing on the riverbank swallowed hard and stepped closer. The quiet sounds of water moving past the rocks, the only thing breaking the silence. He called it in with a tight voice, not knowing that this wasn't just another recovery. It was the opening scene in what would become the longest and most exhausting serial murder investigation in American history. Before the sun set that day, detectives along the Green River would begin to understand that they weren't dealing with tragedy. They were dealing with a predator. Detectives arrived fast. The first body led to another, then another. Some caught between tree roots, others hidden under moss and stone. The air around the river smelled like wet soil and fear. Officers moved with quiet precision, photographing the scene while trying not to disturb anything that could later be the missing thread that tied everything together. A veteran investigator whispered to the sheriff, "This isn't random," and he was right. The pattern was already forming, even if no one wanted to say it aloud. Inside the King County Sheriff's Office, the task force room filled with cigarette smoke and murmurs. The investigators spread early case files across metal tables, each report another reminder of how fast things were escalating. The victims shared similarities. Young women, many involved in prostitution or running away from difficult homes, vulnerable, alone, and someone out there was hunting them with chilling patience. The task force chief leaned forward with both hands pressed against a map of the county, red pins scattered like a constellation of suffering. "He's selecting them carefully," he said. "He's comfortable with this terrain. He knows the river entrances. He knows the dumping sites." A younger detective asked, "So he's local?" The chief didn't look up. "He's more than local. He belongs here." Weeks turned into months. Boaties appeared in wooded patches and ravines. Search teams moved through tall evergreens under gray Washington skies, their boots sinking into the soft ground, sometimes finding bones before realizing what they stepped on. The killer was ahead of them, always ahead. One night, rain hammered the roof of the task force trailer where two investigators worked late. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, throwing cold shadows across the stacks of envelopes and Polaroids. Detective Carol James sifted through victim profiles with trembling fingers. She whispered, mostly to herself, "There's something tying them together. Something he needs." Detective Reeves turned his chair toward her. "He needs control. That's what these guys always want." She shook her head. "Control is too general. He's choosing girls who won't be missed until it's too late. He knows their routines." Reeves leaned back and nodded slowly. "Then he's watching them long before he grabs them." By now, the press had taken notice. Headlines blared warnings. Parents kept their kids closer. Women in vulnerable neighborhoods walked faster at night. The killer had a nickname that spread through the region like a cold wind, the Green River Killer. The police hated it, but it stuck. When the first suspect interview happened, the interrogation room felt heavy with mistrust. A man named Gary Ridgway sat at the metal table, arms folded, claiming he had nothing to hide. His voice was steady, his answers were clean, but something in his eyes bothered the investigators. He seemed too calm, too ordinary. He volunteered samples. He passed the polygraph. And for a moment, they shifted their focus elsewhere. That moment would haunt them for years. The task force grew to more than 40 people. Federal agents, joint behavioral analysts studied crime scene patterns, searching for psychological clues buried in the killer's choices. In a quiet corner of the office, an FBI profiler scribbled notes, murmuring observations as if he was reading the killer's mind. "He's low-key. He blends in. He works a routine job. He's not the monster you look for. He's the man you walk past at the grocery store and never notice." The sheriff stared at him. "You're telling me he's invisible?" The profiler didn't lift his pen. "Yes, and he knows that's his power." Time passed. Cases slowed. The killer didn't stop. He evolved. He changed dumping grounds. He shifted routes. Some victims were found miles apart, hidden in ways that looked almost ritualistic. Detectives sensed his growing confidence. Some felt he was mocking them, staying just distant enough to keep the investigation alive but unsolved. Frustration seeped into the task force room. Files stacked to the ceiling. The phones rang endlessly with false leads. Every few months, a new body surfaced. Every time, it reopened the wound. Officers argued quietly behind closed doors, their nerves unraveling from the pressure. Then DNA technology advanced. Slowly at first, carefully, but it offered something investigators never had before, the hope of irrefutable truth. Old evidence boxes were reopened. Dusty envelopes were cut with surgical precision. Technicians in white lab coats leaned over microscopes and extraction machines, working through long nights. In a sterile government lab with humming fluorescent lights, a technician whispered, "We may have something." She called the lead detective, who arrived breathless. DNA from early victims matched DNA collected from a man tested years ago. A man they had once questioned and released. A man who had confidently told them he had nothing to hide. Gary Ridgway. Ridgway was pulled over on a quiet street. Officers approached with careful steps. He sat behind the wheel, hands visible. Expression unreadable. He didn't fight, he didn't run. He simply looked at the officers like he had expected this moment, like it was inevitable. Back at the interrogation room, Ridgway sat with his shoulders relaxed, as if waiting for a meeting to start. The lead detective placed the DNA report on the table and looked him in the eyes. "We know it's you." For a moment, Ridgway said nothing. Then a small smile crept across his face. "You figured it out," he whispered. When he finally talked, his voice was disturbingly calm. He described the murders with the detachment of someone recounting household chores. His words chilled the room. "They trusted too easily," he said. "I offered a ride. They thought they were safe." He looked down at his hands. "But I couldn't stop. Even when I wanted to, it was like something inside me stayed hungry." Detectives listened with a mix of anger and disbelief. He explained routes, locations, and nights that were burned into the memories of search teams. He remembered the smallest details. Sometimes he even corrected the investigators' timelines. The horror wasn't just in what he said, it was in how ordinary he sounded. One investigator asked why he left some victims near each other. Ridgway shrugged. "It saved time," he said. That single sentence hit harder than any confession. The scale of what he had done suddenly felt even more crushing, reduced in his mind to convenience. The trial was a spectacle, but Ridgway remained expressionless. Families confronted him. Some screamed, some cried, some stood in silent rage. Ridgway stared ahead, barely reacting. A father of one victim walked up to the microphone and said, voice breaking, "You took everything from us." Ridgway blinked slowly, like he didn't understand the depth of what he had done. The legal system faced a decision: pursue the death penalty or extract the full truth. Prosecutors made a deal. Ridgway would avoid execution if he confessed to everything and led investigators to any undiscovered remains. He agreed without hesitation. Not out of remorse, but because he wanted to control the narrative one last time. In the months that followed, investigators traveled with him to forgotten forest patches, abandoned construction sites, and river bends swallowed by time. Ridgway walked the paths as if retracing a familiar commute. Sometimes he paused, looked around, and pointed. Here, officers would dig, and the silence afterward always felt like a funeral. For some families, the discoveries brought closure. For others, only pain. And as the count grew, the full magnitude of his crimes became undeniable. He confessed to dozens of murders, though investigators believed the real number could be higher. When the sentencing arrived, the courtroom was quiet enough to hear papers shift. The judge delivered the final words with steady force, condemning Ridgway to life in prison without the possibility of release. Ridgway showed no emotion, not even a breath changed. In the years that followed, investigators looked back at the case as a lesson in patience, failure, breakthroughs, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The task force members aged, retired, and carried memories they didn't often speak about. For many, the Green River investigation remained the defining chapter of their careers. Gary Ridgway spent his days in a small cell, the walls bare, the silence constant. He was no longer invisible. No longer the ordinary man who drove a truck and blended into the neighborhood. He was a symbol of how darkness can hide in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike.